All right, y'all, welcome to the show. Hope everybody had a good weekend. I'm currently in the process of firing up my brain so I can get through the show with some coherent thoughts for y'all. I also have a dog under my feet who might move the camera at any minute, so be prepared for that. So a lot of stuff to get to today. Right off the bat, is war with Iran imminent? We'll break it down. The short of it is, I don't know, but we're certainly on the brink, and a lot of it is going to depend on what Israel does next. Then we're going to get to Israel injures 7 journalists in a bombing in Gaza. They were attacking a refugee camp. That's when this happened. It's so wild to think like, hey, you journalists got in the way when we were trying to kill refugees. Why'd you do that? It's like, you're not really supposed to be bombing either journalists or refugees, but as we all know, totally unhinged ethno-state theocracy. Then we'll get to neocon John Bolton on CNN begging for war with Iran. We'll get to Trump's rally crowd chants something that's absolutely shocking. Wait until you see that video. Bill Maher goes full Republican. John Fetterman, again, stoops to a new low. And later on, RFK Jr. makes a pretty big mistake, if you ask me. So we'll dive into all that and more. Everybody do me a big favor. Please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It helps out massively, costs you absolutely nothing. Trying to get to that 10 million subsies number. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into it here. So as you all know, the other day, we talked about the breaking news that Iran did a retaliatory strike against Israel. The reason for that is because Israel attacked an Iranian consulate in Syria. So in other words, there was a direct act of war. It was aggression on the part of Israel against Iran. Iran was put in basically an unwinnable situation because if they don't respond, then yet again, it's another example of Israel kind of like slapping them around. And, you know, domestically, that would have made Iran look incredibly weak. And internationally, same thing. Iran would have looked weak and Israel would have known, hey, we can get away with doing whatever the hell we want to do, not only to Iran, but also to Hezbollah and Lebanon. And you know how they are. You know how Israel is. So Iran decided, all right, we're going to do a counterattack. We're going to retaliate. But the way they did it was very strategic because they decided it's like a virtue signal response. It's, we're going to give them like hours of warning, therefore giving them the ability not only to fire up Iron Dome, but to go even beyond that and basically knock all these missiles and these drones out of the sky. It was kind of like almost like a fake retaliation, a retaliation in name only. It gives them enough plausible deniability to look at anybody who says they're weak and say, no, we attacked back. That's not true. But at the same time, it gives Iran an opportunity in a back channel with the U.S. to tell the U.S., look, we don't want war, so here's your warning, here's your heads up. If this goes one step further, then it is going to be all-out war. Okay, so that's effectively what happened. Now let me give you some analysis of this. So Omar Badr, who's very good on this stuff, we've had him on Crystal Kyle and Friends, highly recommend checking out his episodes. He said the following: 3 things to understand about Iran's retaliatory strike on Israel. Paradoxically, the strike was extremely significant, demonstrating Iran's boldness and capacity for deterrence, but also deliberately designed to minimize casualties to try to avoid an all-out war. By the way, I should also point out, they were targeting military installations. Quite the opposite of what Israel does. And in fact, I saw some neocon Zionists on Twitter showing, like, here's a picture of Israel before the Iranian attack and after the Iranian attack, and the pictures look the same. And it's like, you're doing more of a self-own than anything else, because what you're saying is Iran only targets military installations, whereas we target all civilian infrastructure all over the place. So he continues, after Israel struck the Iranian consulate in Damascus, it threatened that any response launched from Iranian territory would be met with a response on Iranian territory. This threat was intended to bully Iran into capitulating, but it had the opposite effect. Iran felt forced to respond from its own territory to demonstrate that it is not intimidated by Israel's threats, and did it via a cautious yet large and multifaceted attack to showcase, as a sample, if you will, what it is capable of should Israel want a major confrontation. There's also speculation that the diversity of Iran's strike was intended to activate all of Israel's defenses so Iran could get deeper insight into these capabilities and figure out how to overcome them should a major war break out. That's an interesting point that I didn't think of. Nonetheless, Iran really wants to avoid a major regional war. It doesn't want to risk a confrontation with the USA, which is why they seem to have deliberately avoided targeting any sites that would cause mass casualties. Israel is now in a bind. The U.S., like Iran, also signaled it doesn't want a regional war, though some in Congress seem to want one. Some is an understatement. I've seen so many statements from Republicans in Congress like, yes, war with Israel, war with Iran. So now it's up to Israel to decide how far they want to take this confrontation, knowing it will be extremely costly to everyone. For now, though, Netanyahu's gamble that the consulate strike would either lead to total Iranian capitulating or an Iranian overreaction that would lead the U.S. to strike Iran, which is Bibi's dream scenario, appears to have failed. But the situation remains very dangerous and precarious. All of this happening not just against the backdrop of Israel's genocidal war on Gaza, but because of Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. Unconditional U.S. backing for Israel's onslaught is bringing the region to the brink, and we urgently need to put an end to it. Netanyahu's remaining gamble is that this regional tension would distract from his horrific war on Palestinian existence, which he believes must continue to cover up his strategic failures to achieve anything. We must not be distracted from this central horror. By the way, also, it's very clear, Netanyahu knows as soon as the war is over, then his ass is done politically. He's out of there. So he has every incentive in the world, not only to keep bombing Gaza relentlessly, but also now to start a new conflict with Iran. So absolutely devastating in so many ways. Now, Biden released a statement in the wake of the Iranian response. Here's what he said. Statement from President Joe Biden on Iran's attacks against the state of Israel. Earlier today, Iran and its proxies operating out of Yemen, Syria, and Iraq launched an unprecedented air attack against military facilities in Israel. It's interesting that he openly admitted it was military facilities. I condemn these attacks in the strongest possible terms. By the way, did Biden say anything when Israel attacked the Iranian consulate in Syria illegally? He said nothing. But he releases a statement for this. At my direction to support the defense of Israel, the U.S. military moved aircraft and ballistic missile defense destroyers to the region over the course of the past week. Thanks to these deployments and the extraordinary skill of our service members, we helped Israel take down nearly all of the incoming drones and missiles. Again, let's be clear. Iran gave ample warning so they would be able to do this. That was the point. Okay? They're peacocking like, oh, look at us, bro. We were able to do a great job here, bro. But Iran wanted them to stop the missiles. So it's a little misleading to pretend like it's just on the skill of the U.S. service members and the Israeli service members that we stopped this. I've just spoken with President Prime Minister Netanyahu to reaffirm America's ironclad commitment to the security of Israel. I told him that Israel demonstrated a remarkable capacity to defend against and defeat even unprecedented attacks, sending a clear message to its foes that they cannot effectively threaten the security of Israel. Tomorrow, I will convene my fellow G7 leaders to coordinate a united diplomatic response to Israel's brazen attack. To Iran's brazen attack, My team will engage with their counterparts across the region. We will stay in close touch with Israel's leaders. And while we have not seen attacks on our forces or facilities today, we will remain vigilant to all threats and will not hesitate to take all necessary action to protect our people. Okay, so then that brings me to this. On CNN, we get this update.
This is the U.S.'s current assessment as of tonight. I'm also told that the president told the prime minister that the U.S. is not going to participate in any offensive operations against Iran. So that's a really important note, given that we have seen the U.S. Obviously taking a lot of steps to come to Israel's defense and play a big role in helping to knock down some of those weapons that Iran launched against Israel. But this is where the U.S. is clearly drawing the line. The president saying anything offensive that might potentially take place from Israel against Iran, that the U.S. is not going to be involved in that.
So here's my fear. They very clearly said the word there multiple times. Israel's not going to help in offensive attack against Iran. Okay, that sounds good, right? Here's the problem. In the past, the U.S. played this game as well, vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia. They said, hey, we're not going to send them any offensive weapons to keep bombing Yemen. They used the word offensive, and it was a very purposeful use of the word offensive, because then what they did is they kept sending weapons, and they turned around and said, oh no, those are defensive weapons, not offensive weapons. We said no, offensive weapons. These are defensive weapons. It was the same fucking weapons, and of course, it's used offensively. Okay. So that's my first concern. My second concern is, guys, what you really have to keep an eye on is what is Netanyahu going to do? Netanyahu very clearly, on purpose, bombed the Iranian consulate in Syria, hoping to provoke a response. Now you had just a virtue signal response, which was really not intended to do damage. It was intended to say, hey, fuck off here. We're letting you know we have the capability to fight back, but we don't want a war, so we're just going to do a little, here's a couple missiles, and I'm giving you ample warning. You could shoot him out of the sky, etc. But what we're already seeing is Netanyahu, other leaders in Israel, Republicans here in the U.S., they're all acting like the sky is falling down and pretending this was a totally unprovoked and unprecedented attack from Iran against the sovereign state of Israel. And this, we cannot believe, we are shocked they would do such a thing, and they started this, and now we're going to retaliate. And so they have every incentive to blow it out of proportion what Iran did. And then they go over the top and retaliate in a hyper-aggressive way. And then we're off to the races, because then Iran would have no chance, no choice but to respond in an over-the-top way as well. So here's what I fear. I fear, because the roadmap has been laid out for decades now. This is what Netanyahu has wanted. The roadmap has been laid out. I think they want to bomb all of Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, by the way, understand something. Iran is legally allowed under international law to have nuclear facilities as long as they enrich only to the level of scientific research and power for their power grid. Okay? But what, of course, the U.S. would say and what Israel would say is, we're going to bomb their nuclear facilities, and the reason we're doing that is to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon, and that's why we're bombing all their nuclear facilities. But if they were to bomb Iranian nuclear facilities, then again, we're off to the races, and we're in another war. And I fear Biden's stance of, we're not going to help Israel with any offensive attacks on Iran. Well, what happens when Israel attacks Iranian nuclear facilities? Then Iran is forced to respond, and then the U.S. says, hey, I said we're not going to help them offensively attack. Now we're going to say it's defensive, and we are going to aid them. So then you have American men and women going to fight in another giant war in the Middle East, a war with Iran. And by the way, make no mistake about it, a war with Iran would be far more devastating than even the Iraq war was. Absolutely horrific and scary to think about what we're on the brink of here. So the Associated Press says, Israel says Iran launched more than 300 drones and missiles, 99% of which were intercepted. Again, this was the point of Iran doing it. Wanted to give them ample warning, wanted them to shoot it out of the sky, so that it was just a little virtue signal, hey, stop, right? Now, by the way, is that number exact? We're not sure. It'll be a while before we know for sure. Maybe 80% of them were blocked and 20% of them got through or whatever. But right now they're saying 99% of the missiles were intercepted. Okay, then we have, you're going to love this, the UN Security Council is going to meet on Sunday, so yesterday, about the Iran attack, because Israel requested an emergency meeting. I love this. So now, all of a sudden, the UN matters to Israel. Now international law is real and ironclad and must be enforced. When 7 seconds ago, in the midst of their genocide, they're brushing off every UN command under the sun. So they have some fucking nerve, man. They have some nerve. It's incredible. All right, then we have this. This is also really interesting. So Iran's chief of staff said the following. Our attack is over and we do not wish to continue it, but we will respond forcefully if Israel targets our interests. Israel crossed red lines by targeting our consulate in Damascus, and it had to be responded to. So in other words, again, this is Iran saying, you forced our hand. We had to do this. We went soft. It's a virtue signal attack. That's why we gave you so much warning. You shot all the things out of the sky. But now let's call it even Stevens and end it. What Iran perhaps doesn't know as much as they should, is that Israel and Netanyahu are now going to use this. And they are very likely going to retaliate again, and we're off to the races, because this is what Netanyahu wants. Guys, that's not speculation on my part. That's not an opinion. This is not subjective. We know shit going all the way back to like the George W. Bush administration. Netanyahu had a hard-on for a war with Iran. And in every single administration, he's pushed us further and further down that path. And then we'll end with this. Netanyahu had several objectives with the Iranian consulate attack. Sultan Barakat, professor in conflict and humanitarian studies at Qatar's Foundation Hamad bin Khalifa University, spoke to Al Jazeera about what Benjamin Netanyahu hoped to achieve with the April 1st attack on the Iranian consulate in Syria. He said the Israeli prime minister had the following objectives. Number one, extend the status of war and, with it, the emergency rules that keep him in power for now by reminding everyone that Iran will retaliate as a threat. Number two, he He also managed to silence the little criticism that had started to come from Washington concerning his operations in Gaza. That's very true. It's very unlikely that anyone there will say anything against Israel over the coming few days. Number 3, he's also going to accelerate the delivery of the weapons that Biden has promised, including the critical F-35 jet fighters. Number 4, critically, he is also going to silence the opposition within his own country. He will stop the right of demonstrations on the basis that Israelis are all under the threat of Iran. So these are Netanyahu's goals. And this time right now is the most dangerous yet. What's happening right now is the most dangerous yet because they want the war with Iran. They're very likely to retaliate. Then Iran is going to be put in a position where yet again they have to retaliate. And then we're really off to the races. And I think Joe Biden is too senile or too dumb to really understand all of the moving pieces on the chessboard and what to do about them. And he's basically at the whim of a psychotic, theocratic ethno-stater from the Likud party, Benjamin Netanyahu. Up shit's creek without a paddle. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.